have an exciting show today. Um, it's not very often that we have somebody joining us from uh, the kingdom of Drachenwald. Um, Food is a very magical thing. It connects people from across the world. I can be eating something that somebody in, let's say, Ireland is eating, and it kind of connects us because we're eating the same thing. Likewise, across time. So I feel a very special connection when I'm eating something that somebody from, you know, about 500 years ago is eating, and that connects us. And so I think this is very special what we're doing today. So with that, I'm going to have our guest introduce herself, and we'll go from here.
Hello, everybody. I'm Maeve. My long name is Meadhbh Rois Ineagh. Lucky enough when I joined the SCA that my maiden name is O'Keefe, which dates back to the 6th century. So I just found it very easy to find a persona and not have to go to search for one. So hence my love of Anton Irish. Now, my cooking started with many different influences. As we move through the slides, we will see that the Irish food through the ages is magical. So we're going to begin with the first forager, the first farmers, the monastic settlements, the Vikings, the Anglo-Normans, the Gaelic Irish, and anything that I can find that is associated with food in Ireland. Unfortunately, in the early times, we don't have much written down. So my research into Irish food had to take a different track completely. Stories, myths, legends. So we can cook from a story because we have the Ashley McCunnaglin, and I could cook menus for the rest of my life once a month using the Ashley McCunnaglin alone, never mind anything else. So that's it. But because we live in 20th century, 21st century, we have lovely science and archaeology is really taking off here. So you have evidence of the botany and the faunal remains here in Ireland. The new roadworks in Ireland in the last 20 years has thrown up a lot of new antiquities and new finds, new pits, new Follockfias, new lots of stuff to absorb. I'm still waiting on reports to come out from certain archaeological digs to say, right, what can we cook based on that feast and that place and that time? So that's fun and lots of um, lots of interesting food to come. During the year of the pandemic, I just built an ordinary pit out in my back garden to have fun because we were all grounded. We couldn't move. And I had loads of fun out in the back garden just by a fire pit to see what kind of food I could cook. That year, somebody gave me the name of the Fire Lady, but I have many nicknames and I'm Queen of the Breakfasts. So you'll have to come to Ireland and have one of my breakfasts. I am Maeve of the Nine Cauldrons. I would equate when we have to cook inside a slow cooker as the modern day cauldron. And as you can see from a small feast that I did, that we actually used 9 cauldrons, and it was a very fun feast, and it was my first Irish feast that I actually attempted at the time. So we start at the beginning. We don't start in the middle, and I know the SCA is roughly 1,000 years, but I like to prove, first of all, that the food was eaten in early times. It's still there today, and it's still available. So there's no point having all these lovely feasts or eating Irish food and it's not available. It's great, well, especially during the pandemic. Just I could lay my hands on the food, so it makes life a lot easier. So we started with the hunter-gatherer. I have a fascination for seafood. And some of my friends and some of the great cooks did a fish Lenten challenge. It was to eat as much fish as you could during a Lent period, based on based on, say, on fast days, and based on, and it wasn't in the religious context, it was in the SCA context. What could we do with fish during early times and down through the ages? So I had lots of fun with that. So I actually have an absolute fascination with shell middens. I think they're seriously cool, and I can cook on a beach in my back garden, and from a hunter-gatherer, take my oyster, place it on top of my oysters or my mussels even, place them on top of embers, peat, and have the most delicious food in a few minutes. Cooking oysters and cockles at the seaside over a barbecue or over any kind of hot embers. You do not need to shuck them to open them, because the heat will actually open them for you. And I would reckon that an awful lot of recipes in the SCA call for the addition of oysters, and I can see why, because the intense taste given off by the oyster and its water, even in a shell, is absolutely gorgeous and provides natural flavoring without having to add other flavorings. So I can see why, as we go through time, that oysters were added to the pies of all different sorts in England and all over, just to add flavors. I can see why the call for shellfish to be added. The taste, especially if freshly caught, is just magical. And oysters have continued to be as one of the foods that we still eat today, and has been sold in markets in Dublin through the centuries. So just as we are an island in Ireland, we are surrounded by the sea, so it would be a sin not to use seafood in your Irish feast, if at all available. So I'm picking books that kind of had mentioned seafood. You will see through my through this that I have pictures of books on, but they're just books that would mention, the shell middens, to show where the research comes from. You can pick it up anywhere. As we talk about hearths and fires in Neolithic times on the next page, that we go to an SCA event, and if we're outside and we're cooking, people come and talk. If we offer food and give taste, it is beautiful. And more people come, and more people socialise, and it just brings people together, as it has done through the Irish ages. So the heart of any Irish food is really good. It will bring people together. It is culture, it is social, and it is living. It is history living in itself. So we build a picture of food that goes with the heart, cooking for all ages, from Neolithic onwards up to modern day. It is important that fire is mentioned, because it has sustained people through the Irish ages with the cooking of food. We're building the social aspect around the fireplace, and even at this time of the year, I would reckon an awful lot of people sat around the fire, ate their food, talked and chatted. So as we say, it is part of the SCA dream to sit and have food all together. Now we're going to go on a little bit, because my food finds, as I mentioned quickly before, that in the stories, myths and legends provide a lot of information, old and new. In Ireland, food and story, and myth and legend, culture of Ireland we're storytelling, language passing on was how we did it before the written word. So this is really important. So the lovely manuscripts that we see from the 7th, 11th, 14th century onwards. Even if they are only copied in the 11th, 12th, and 14th century, they were taken from copies originally done in the 7th, 8th, 9th century. So Ashley McConaughey, a satirical poem with all kinds of food about wheaten cakes, streaky bacon, honey, stir-about porridge, fruit clusters, cream, buttermilk, curds, bacon, full-fat sausages, new milk, nuts, fruit, gravy, dripping kidneys, different cuts of meat, white porridge made of sheep's milk, meat with purple berries, kale, custard, corned beef, oats, apple, flour cake, just to mention some. Now, how many of you can make a feast? And I always say, when I kind of look at this list, and the joke is about coming to Ireland on holidays and having the Irish fry. Medievally, it wasn't an Irish fry, but all the foods were available, and we we're just taking the same ingredients and using them the way we want to use them in the modern day. So full-fat sausages, bacon, kidney, porridge. How many of us eat all this for our breakfast when we come on holidays to Ireland? So it's definitely available. My screen is on the move, but we shall fix. Okay. Now, my favourite, Breton laws, 7th century. We have one of the oldest laws in the absolute world. We respected all genders, which was really cool to come when we come to think of it today and how life is changing. But it is a great resource to find information about food. So, as I mentioned previously about the porridge, leche, stir-about, is given to all, but the flavourings are different. So, salt, butter, and for the sons of inferior grades. This is the social aspect of food in the making. It's actually in the laws. Oatmeal or porridge, we know today, has different ways of being made, yet again based on your hierarchical position in society. But at least today, everybody can have porridge, and it's not dependent on whether you're a king, a son of a king, or adopted fosterage. So I kind of like this. It was one of the things that I fell in love with when I was doing research. So stir-about made of oatmeal on buttermilk or water is given to the sons of the Fina, and the bare sufficiency of it merely, and salt butter for flavouring. Stir-about made on new milk given to sons of the chieftain grades, and fresh butter for flavouring, and full sufficiency is given to them. This is made of barley meal. Stir-about made of new milk is given to sons of kings, and made of wheaten meal and honey for flavour. There is so much information in this. There is so much. So, porridge. Can you imagine just setting up a big pot of porridge and having butter available to put into it? Fresh butter, freshly made, cream, salt, new milk, porridge made of barley meal, wheat meal, oatmeal, flavourings of honey. So also the monastic settlements in Ireland had their own rules about how you would have your porridge, whether you were on fast days, whether you were sick, and what you were entitled to. And also during the saints' lives and scholars, you will find different stories about oatmeal, stir-about. Oatmeal and stir-about really is pottage. It's pottage with different things added, and it can be flavored sweet, it can be flavored with greens, it can be flavored to whatever you want to do. So it's the original pottage, to be honest. So my favorite is adding honey, or if I wanted savory, ramsons or wild garlic. I just think I have a fascination with ramsons and wild garlic. So that is it. So Breton law gives us the aspect of who can eat what at that time. But as you know, in the SCA, everybody shares the same food, and that's how it goes. So we have the chieftains and the kings, and they have that table itself makes you have lots of fun, and especially when you have lists of food, putting a table together kind of makes that you can chop and change it. And how many different pottages, porridges, stir about can you get out of that table alone is massive. So the Breton law gives us an insight into life in the 8th century. So we're hitting the SAA time periods now, so we're going well. We're up here in the 8th century. So you can arrange your events around a time and place, whether you want to have it for the everyday person, whether you want to have it for the chieftain or the son of a king, and build your feast team around that. In Ireland, I have to say, and it doesn't matter where I go in the world, fresh milk, so salted butter or butter just is unique to Ireland, and it has been for centuries. The cows are fed on green grass that is green, and it is fresh, and it is gorgeous. And it doesn't matter where I go in the world, I've yet to come across butter and milk that tastes the same. So it really works. So butter, as you know, has many discoveries, and even my local bog at home, there was a discovery of 5,000-year-old butter wrapped in the bog, and neighbours found it. And I literally had a school book one time about it, and the same neighbour passed away, and my husband dropped off the book because it had a publication and a picture of her husband with the butter. And we would say that the taste of really old butter like that kind of tastes garlicky. So they reckon that the scientist part of it would tell you that sometimes the butter could have been wrapped in garlic, but it seems to take on that, wild garlic seems to take on that kind of taste, and that it more or less looks like a hard cheese. Well, I suppose after 5,000 years, what would you expect? Like, so, so the burying of butter in the bogs was often offering to the people or the gods, but in fairness, I kind of prefer the living side rather than the funerary side, so I don't really go that much into the likes of Newgrange and Rackrogan and a few places like that, as in a note. And the pots, I kind of like that there's butter found in the bog. Okay, who threw it in? Why did it throw it in? But what does it taste like would be more of an interest to me. But I'd be hoping that you wouldn't get food poisoned, whoever deemed to say what it tasted like in their time. So as you know, so we have porridge, we have cereals, we have dairy, we have honey, and we have fish. So we're going well. We really are going well with the mix of food that's available to us then and now. There was the oldest oatcake biscuit was found in Lisley, an oatcake or a biscuit made from oats and a liquid, which they reckon was the remnants of what was left over by cheese. It's one of my favorite finds. So, and it was found by F. Monk, McLaren's, and Regina Sexton, and it is really good to know that your first bread, after all, is just a cereal made moist with a liquid. So the liquid can be water, it can be whey, it can be the remnants after you've made buttermilk, it can be anything you want it to be. So in general, research will tell you that if you're making bread, it is a cereal mixed with a liquid. And nobody can actually tell you that you're wrong. It can be flavored with lard dripping.
Bread only goes together a few ways, so you're pretty limited.
Yeah. So. Yes, you're very limited. But the fun part about it is that it's so easy make. It's so easy make, and people make things complicated, but the unleavened breads works really good for me. And as you find out when I go through through this that I'm actually not really a bread person, but I will make flatbread all day for you. And I will cook on a gridiron all day with breads. Yeah, you know, so.
I'm the same. Usually I like having the flexibility of being a cook, and my wife, I let her do the baking because it's a little bit more rigid.
Yes. As we go along, you'll find ovens was not the big deal it was in Ireland as it was in England and surrounding areas, Wales and places like that. So far we have seafood. I like seafood in my feast. I like butter in my feast. I've mentioned wild garlic and honey. Honey is my other additive. And I love nothing better than to go to local beekeepers in different places. And when I go on holidays in Ireland, what you will find in my press is honey from Youghal, honey from Roscommon, honey from the north, up the north side, because all the honeys taste different depending on the flower and the habitat that the honey comes from. So if it's a mountain area, a pasture area, they're completely different tastes. So that it gives a completely different taste to your porridge, to your flatbread. It's just cool. I just have fascination with honey. So so here we have my additives, we have the wild garlic, we have honey, and we have butter. We're going well. Nice things to flavour food with. So I have mentioned the Breton laws before, and there is actually a whole section on beekeeping. And it's all about whether the bees swarm, stay on your property, come off your property. So there's fines so you're allowed, if bees come on your property for a certain length of time, free honey, but then you have to hand some of it back to the neighbour, especially if the bees came from their land originally. Now I came across this while I was putting this together, so it's actually a copy of the book on the internet so that you can read through. I've only dipped in and out of it. And anything to do with Fergus Kelly is he's a solicitor, or a lawyer is what he was, but he's the best resource we have concerning Irish food in early times. So the next page this was the book that was recommended to me by Aidan O'Shehall, which is another great Irish cook. We are lucky. We have a good few good cooks on the island of Ireland here.
Would be the next one.
So on the next page, Early Irish Farming has an index as long as your arm of food. I always say if it's not in the index, you can forget about it. So
Evans.
Sorry.
Hold on. Oh, there we go. Sorry.
We're okay. Sorry.
So I put up the cover of the books that make life easy for people to get, that they can look it up and say, okay, that's the one that looks like that, you know. But if it's not in that index, I wouldn't even go any further for a while. Do you know what I mean? If it's not in that index, there's enough in that index to keep you going for the rest of your life. Regarding food, and he's great history of food, whether it came in Anglo-Norman times, whether it was there in early times, whether it was in Breton law, so it's just a magical book to start with. It's probably the main recommendation. If you just want one good Irish resource, I would get that one. And as we live in the 21st century, the new food analyst that is becoming part of our archaeological reports will make for really interesting cooking. I am so happy that I'm kind of the age now that I can appreciate all the new science that's coming. And it's going to change how we research stuff in the SCA as well regarding food. Not so much based on, it won't all, because there wasn't the written word, we will actually be able to take a time, era, a place, and the food that they found in that area, and you could actually build a feast on that alone. So that makes for really, really interesting new types of food coming around and new types of cooking. So we're going on. I live in an area called Nenagh, County Tipperary, in the Midlands of Ireland. And we are, so growing up in Ireland is castles, churches. You go up and down the road, there's a 15th century, go into Nenagh, you have the Butler's castle that was built. Now it's just a round tower and a bit of a wall at the minute. And then you go to Roscrea and you have High Crosses, which is another town locally. So there's just history. If you come to Ireland, there's history everywhere. We'd always say we had the best playground in the world. So it was just the natural part of your life. So we're going to move on to the next page and we're going to talk about bread, ovens, plums, cherries, rabbits, pheasants, fallow deer, and crop rotation. So we are talking about when the Anglo-Normans came. And so 10th century, more or less onwards, 10th, 11th, 12th, and what they brought to Ireland. So they brought the bread ovens. Now, there was probably some in the monastic settlements already, but they really made them popular in castles and urban areas. The plums and cherries just become, they were available through the monasteries and stuff, but they just became very much part of the orchard. Rabbits, so they are equated with bringing rabbits to Ireland. The hare was always here, but the rabbit wasn't. A love of fallow deer parks. This is when deer parks really took off, being built in Ireland. Pheasants and crop rotation. Also with that, the dovecotes, which I absolutely love. My best idea of a day out is just finding a dovecote. So the dovecote provides the birds for cooking. It provides the feathers needed for manuscript, for writing. It provides the fertilizer needed for the garden in the first place. So it is just one of those beautiful things. Chicken became very popular with the Anglo-Normans. Because it was a renting kind. There's the little red book of the Ormond, and you will see capons and chickens and hens, especially, as part of the rent. And rent can be paid twice a year, sometimes at Christmas and at Easter, along with cereals, par flocks of sheep, pigs, and cattle. So the Lord or the chief, in particular, ate well. But then he had to pay rent probably to higher up in society as well. So it was ongoing. But the chicken definitely became more, or the capon became more popular to be eaten on the table, they reckon, during the Anglo-Norman move over. So I'm coming up now to the 14th century. I'm kind of driving up and down really fast. But I just want to check what I have here. So on the next page then we have ovens, the famous page with the ovens. Ovens broke my heart. It actually broke my heart here because I couldn't find a whole lot on ovens. And I thought I was imagining the fact that there wasn't that many ovens here. But after much research, much discussion with Aid as well, much kind of looking, I kind of came to the conclusion, and he came to the same conclusion as me, that ovens were mostly in places where they built with stone, number one, which was castles, monasteries. That and we came to the conclusion, I just came across something saying that the way Ireland was divided up during the medieval period and earlier was in parishes and townslands. Not so much villages and hamlets as it was in the UK. So that meant people and the population more dispersed. So it didn't pay somebody to build an oven and cook the bread for the local people because they'd have to come too far to get their bread cooked. So we can see why there wasn't as many ovens. But saying that, if you were in a monastery, and I work in a place called Ballinasloe in County Galway. And on the way up the road, this is the cool part about coming to Ireland. I pass so many old places associated with history that I could do a feast based on every one of them. But there's an abbey called Clontuskert that my baron pointed out to me that there was actually an oven in it originally, Etienne, so I went to have a look. But I also discovered about the ovens that depending on the size of the oven, it can actually tell you the population of the monastery and how many actually lived there. So that was kind of a cool bit of random information associated. But the book that we had, I'm not going back to the last page, but the book that we have was 14th century account roll of the Priory of the Holy Trinity, Dublin, 1337 to 1346. And in this book, the ovens, there's an awful lot of mentions of roast meat being bought and pastries and pasties being bought. So the pastries and the pasties were bought because there were the food place in Dublin in that time was actually near the Holy Trinity, the Priory of the Holy Trinity. So it was just as easy to go to the baker who was baking his pasties and pastries in ovens and buy your fowl pastries, buy your rabbit pastries, buy whatever they were mixed. And you would find through different rules down through the times, there was a lot of rules about how much meat should be in the pastry and what wasn't allowed in pastry and what the fines were if you were caught doing that, so people wouldn't get poisoned. But saying that, dry ovens were found in early times in association with Follock-Fias. But now they reckon with the new sciences coming on that there was actually clay ovens in other places, but they just got washed away. And so it'll be interesting to see what the food analysts for the next 10 years will tell us. Was there an awful lot more ovens used?
I think we're in a very fascinating time. So little time has been devoted to culinary history, and we're just finding out so much more with like bog finds and pit finds. Is a fascinating time to be alive.
There's lots of lovely courses in Dublin to do with food, and there is people doing PhDs now based on food.
Yeah.
And due to the pits, the finds, and everything like this. So really going to be interesting for the next 10 to 15 years. So in the account roll of the Priory of the Holy Trinity is another book that you could stay making food for the rest of your time, because all you have to do is take your list of food, find the way it was cooked at that time in that period, and make a feast. So there is a huge list of food there. There's cooked capons, there's roast meat, there's hen roasted fowl, lamb, plover, roast beef, mutton, chicken, hog, and pigeon. And then we have figs. We actually have figs in 1337 to 1346. We have almonds, we have wine, we have oysters, we have pandemain is a white bread that the more wealthy ate, rather than stuff that ground the teeth down. So maybe your wife might like to have a go at cooking pandemain in her baking, but I'm not sure how it goes. So there's a huge range of food, and then you have wine and ale, and then we have how we're going to flavour the food. We have white salt, we have pepper, verjuice, ginger, mustards, and all kinds of spices. Now, there is a story that I've come across that a bishop in Cork actually held ransom for £60 initially of getting a ship landed that was in trouble from Holland. And so he demanded £60 of the spice that was on the ship to be given to him in order for safe passage. But when he got the master of the ship off and into his abode, he demanded a higher ransom for him, which equated to £232 of spice, including, I think, ginger, nutmeg, cinnamon, and a few like that. But I just thought it was priceless to think that a bishop would actually demand a ransom of spices in a period in Ireland that you could actually make lots of food with all this random spice that was going around Cork at that stage. So it's just coming across tidbits that make it interesting and saying, right, cook a really good spicy feast based on this area at this period, because I know there was spice in that area because the bishop got, and he probably sold it off to make money off it. So as you can see, trying to decide which rabbit hole to go down. I always describe my cooking in the SCA as a big warren with all connecting boroughs and which rabbit holes that we'll actually go down and see what we're going to cook. They're all interconnected. They all go through the ages. So cooking a Viking feast, an Anglo-Norman feast based on cronogues and what they found there in the floors of them. Fast days, meat days, food available in 14th century, Tudor feasts, pie feasts, mid feasts and Gaelic feasts. And as we know, trade is really good. So the Bristol trade books that you can lay your hand on will actually give you what was imported and exported out of Ireland for 16th century. Monastic gardens, archaeological digs, pits all provide information around what kind of food that you can cook. I say I cook through the Irish ages, and I mean from Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age, all the way up through all the centuries, and can prove that I can find food in this area. People travelled between, especially the Anglo-Normans, they would have travelled over and back and would have been in court in Queen Elizabeth's time even, and would have had associations. The Vikings came and went, but they still traded. And there is actually a lot of good information available based on the Viking food in Dublin. And it's equal to anywhere in the world as far as that is concerned. So you could have a fine Viking feast. One of the things that I found difficult to find information on was about pickling when we're talking about the Vikings. Whether it was just because everybody knew how to do it or it wasn't done here as a norm. But in the Bristol books, there is port books, there is information of kind of old wine coming in. So I don't know whether that's actually the vinegar kind of that's wine gone off and that'll do for pickling. The monastic gardens are just magical. If you can get a good one, that's going to give you, I'm waiting for a grange allocated to monastic settlements I'm just waiting for different archaeological reports to come online. I could have to wait 3 or 4, but so you're always looking forward to see what's coming down the road. Looking to the east, as our Baroness said to me one time, that if you want to do foods, you have to look to the east and the west. But as you know, going on the west side, it's America is the nearest place after that. So on the east, we're going to look at what they cooked in the UK, what they cooked in Brittany. The monastic settlements could have English influences or Brittany influences or different parts depending on their mother house and where they originally came from. Some of the monastic settlements were just Gaelic and had Gaelic lords over them. So it's really looking at where people came from. We're the island of saints and scholars for a reason. And so they traveled all over Europe, and there's proof of them traveling all over Europe. And you can be sure in their Lugworth garden that new plants came back with them. If they found something that worked, that they bought different plants back with them. So we are looking to the east mostly to see what ingredients were used and in what context. and did the influences come to Ireland? So the influence of the people cooking the food in the first place depends on where they originated from, where they were born into, and what the norm was for food in Ireland. And that's basically Ireland through the ages of food.
I remember reading that pre-Roman invasion of England, the Romans knew that Dublin was a trading hub. So I imagine, trade goes way back.
Oh, it goes way back. It goes back to for Mesolithic, they would reckon, and especially when just deciding when the cow came into Ireland, it was found at Ferreter's Cove in Kerry, and they just reckon, that there was people just trading along the motorway of the Atlantic Ocean, basically, and people were coming up and down from different places, and they were maybe coming to just travel and see what's happening and finding new places, but they brought their own food with them as well. So there is evidence all around. Cattle was huge anyway here in Ireland because you were determined how wealthy, even in Breton law times, and your fines were and your payment was based on how many milk cattle that you had. And that was how your fines were paid as well. So it could cost you animals if you stole, I think it was, I came across as a two and a half milk cows for stealing somebody's wild garlic from their property, which is really expensive. Like,
oh yeah, that would be that's steep fine.
That would be a really steep fine. Now, so just different things like fines were payments for misdemeanors were paid in milk cows from according to Breton law. So that is you try and behave or you're going to lose some of your herd, like.
And you were talking about a difference between diet of a man and a woman, just briefly. Is that based on health conventions at the time?
It was that you were entitled to so much food, and it depended on whether you were pregnant. And the Breton laws actually say, if you're pregnant, you're entitled to so much food, and if you have a craving for food, it had to be given to you.
Ooh.
And then they measured bread as well through the medieval times. So you had a man's portion and a woman's portion, and they weighed different. So it was a different size. So things like that. So it kind of seemed to be part of the laws as well. So to make things regular, that if you were selling a man's portion of bread, it had to be so many ounces, and the same for women, or it had to be so many fingers thick. So not as well up in that, but I know that there was a lot of laws around food, and so if you became even divorced or separated for some reason during the Breton laws, that you had to have so much, that the woman got to take her wealth with her. It wasn't left to the husband. So if she came with so many cows, milk cows, she could walk off with that many milk cows, like. So she could take her wealth back with her. So it was a lot more equal in gender than what we're fighting for.
Don't look at me that way. You didn't bring any cows with you.
I brought a spinning wheel.
Well, that would count too. You could take that back with you.
There we go. I'm moving to Ireland. No. Not really. I'm not planning to leave. I'm not.
Well, it's just that, like, when you think you're fighting for your rights in this modern world, and to think that 7th, 8th, 9th century had these lovely laws that fought for you already, like.
Yeah, Ireland's always had a special relationship with the feminine, with women, especially pregnant women.
Yes. I would agree. I would agree. I would agree anyway that it was just friendlier laws, and probably the church and society changed a lot of it here at the time, like and then of course I suppose we were governed by England, and they didn't like the Breton laws either. They wanted their laws implemented in instead, and there was an awful lot of rules made about not obeying the Irish laws and obeying the English laws and things like that. So it was just the changes that came with having different governments in the country down through the many centuries.
Yeah.
And sometimes
oh, go ahead.
As an Irish person, you kind of have to say, okay, okay, Joe, in this modern world, you don't like some of the stuff, but it's just the way it was, But it makes for interest. It makes really interesting reading now. And without some of it, then we have some stuff that we can, at least we have some written stuff to say, about the laws and about food and cattle and agriculture and stealing and rustling and whatever else, but it gives us at least a starting point to work from.
Yeah. Have any?
Oh, I have questions about the feast with the cauldrons.
Or the feast with cauldrons.
I think you had said that you had done a feast using cauldrons.
Well, no, I don't know with slow cookers, because I equate that.
Oh, okay. Well, I still have questions.
That would be kind of simulating a pot.
I just so what kind of foods were you? Was it primarily like stew based? Were you doing roasted meat type of things? Don't turn that camera towards me, young man.
Okay, so I would have done some with, let's say, cooking the barley and the barley berries themselves, not ground up, or I'm not a lover of pottage, but I can eat or porridge, to be honest, but I can eat it if the whole berries are whole, and I just kind of mush them when they're cooked. So I like cooking a lot of stuff with, say, the wheat berries and the barley berries and stuff like that, so that it's the whole kernel rather than just part of it. And then you can have sweet and savoury. And then I cooked some roast meats in it. My really nice one was a beef kind of stew with purple berries. And now the purple berries I used was blackberry. And it was just a case of just long, slow cook. And I used shin beef with lots of fat joints off the leg, and it's hard to get even here in the butcher. But I reckon you cannot cook meat with, you cannot cook a soup that has flavorings without fat in it. So kind of getting the, as we call it, the shin beef here. And then I used the wild garlic and salt and just done things like parsley and stuff like that, and just kind of marinated it in the meat overnight, and that I took in some of the taste from that and just fried it off as you would, and put it into a slow cooker, because also cookers deem that you fry off the meat, and you could actually put some flour on it as well if you want, and then just cook it really, really slow for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And then when you go to serve it, it has the most magical taste with just, and it was I actually did a clear broth more so than with the beef, and then just put blackberry in the bottom of your bowl and off you go. Leave the blackberry to the last taste. Now we reckon the purple berries could be blackberries, could be fronds, or whortleberries, or your modern day blueberry kind of, but the fronds, my mum is from the Sleeve Bloom areas, and so she would have spent her childhood going picking frothen berries on the Sleeve Blooms on Frothen Sunday, which is the last Sunday in July. So to think that these purple berries were eaten through the centuries, and were marketed in Dublin. They used to go out and pick them off the Dublin mountains and come in and sell them in later periods in the markets in Dublin. But like frottenberries have been an age-old berry in Ireland that was used. So that was one of my favourites, I have to say, that was from the Ashley McConnell blend. And then roast meats, vegetables, vegetable pottages. So I just ended up using nine cauldrons, as we say, or nine slow cookers. But the magic of the feast was I used to just have to come back and stir it every hour or two once I had the prep done and everything loaded into and the biggest problem was giving people back their proper slow cookers at the time. So I'm supposed to be doing, our investiture will be probably in July again, 2023, and I'm doing an Irish feast at that. And I will be pushing out a big call for any slow cooker that I can find in the place. They literally went up and down a hallway, and all you had was every plug had a slow cooker in it. And I'd come back and I'd have a spoon beside it and a plate every so often and just give it a stir. So it just made for really handy food, and then any, soups then based on peas and whatever vegetables. But the magic time of the year is, I love the spring for wild garlic. So I actually make garlic butter out of it and freeze it in the freezer. So then I can have it at the other time of the years, then to mix through, even to mix through oats to make a flatbread, so that, or you can do it with dripping or whatever. So things like that, so just anything that you put into anything that you can use it in modern day, I used it for my feast. So, and I kind of like that anybody can have a go. Anybody can have a go then.
So I've got a question. So in a lot of places in Europe, beef was not all that common in people's diets. In Ireland, is it more common?
Well, they killed off, even in early times, the beef was killed off. So the male beef would have been killed off kind of coming into the winter. But a lot of the time the cattle went to the lords, so the poor people wouldn't have it, but the richer people and the lords and the chiefs would have it. So it was more common. And then it was also very common to bleed your cattle and mix with a cereal to make black pudding or pudding sausage, wherever part you live in Europe. But it was from the live animal rather than the dead animal. And so it was used like, and it would have been used for feasts and things like that. So, but mostly, so you would find in the archaeological digs, they're able to say how much, now they're able to tell you from their finds, 40% beef, 30% sheep. Sheep, goats kind of go as the same thing. And then so much on hogs and pigs and things like that. So it definitely was eaten as part of a feast. And if they're killing off the animals before the winter comes in, there's a lot of meat in an animal. So you could see people getting together and celebrating different things and having a feast and using the beef like. So yes, but there's nobody to say you're wrong and there's nobody to say you're right, is the joys of doing it this way. I'm just saying there's 70% or 40% beef on this site. So more than not, they ate beef sometime of the year. And there's proof of beef being butchered and cut some bones. So yes. Why would you be butchering them if you weren't going to eat them?
Well, yeah, and you're also saying that with your butter, you have grass for the cows year round, as green grass. So probably reducing the herd during winter isn't as dire, but yeah, I can see. Yeah.
Well, you're going to reduce the males rather than the ones that are going to provide you with milk.
You only need so many boys.
Yeah, basically.
Well, where do you set-
Unfortunately.
Well, so it's me again, the voice from beyond. The oat cakes. Were you making? I'm just thinking. I know that one of the people watching right now is one of our people who does feast cooking. So, for the oat cakes, did you include those as part of your feast, or is that just kind of a staple food item that would have been common and it's good for like camp cooking?
Well, it's good for camp cooking, but I'm actually going to include some of them in the next feast I do for our next Irish feast. I will actually cook some of the oat cakes as well as part of it, because I just think flatbreads were a huge part of the food, and especially if you lived out the country and you had in the way of cooking bread or baking bread, flat cakes was part and parcel of it. And like even for traveling, I would reckon just bringing some cereal with you in some kind of leather pouch and mixing it with a bit of liquid and cooking it on hot embers or on a leaf, you have instant food. So I just liked look up the Lisley oat cake, because it just makes for interesting reading, like in the time and place. And if they're able to cook it in that time and place, it can be cooked anywhere. Now it's burnt biscuit, but it is the actually first kind of really proof of Irish breads, so it is seriously cool. Another publication then would be, the Irish Archaeology do an online, so you can actually have their magazine delivered to you 4 times a year, I think it is, but you can actually have an online thing that you can read down through all their, and you find interesting tidbits about different things in that. So that's a really good resource as well, if you just want general stuff in Ireland, and it gives you lots of places kind of that you say, oh God, I might go visit there, as well. So they do have interesting parts. The joy of coming to Ireland is that there's history everywhere. Like there's ring forts all over the place. Like there's so many fields you can't build in. I reckon there's about 60,000 ring forts in Ireland, down to, when you compare it to Britain, which is about 3 times the size of Ireland, I think, and they only have about 5,000 or 6,000, whereas we have about 60,000. So I'm driving along the road and going, oh, there's a ring of trees. That's a ring fort or a rat or a cashel or whatever it is. So that's the difference. Like, we're just full of.
It is something that where we are geographically, we're in the state of Oregon in the U.S., and there is ancient archaeology here. It's just it's not the same as like a big stone castle, and you really don't know what you're looking at unless unless somebody's told you exactly what that pile of rocks over there maybe serves, something like that.
We tried to come to Ireland.
Yeah. Oh yes, we had planned to come visit.
Yeah.
But that was a wrong time.
Well, you can plan again sometime and come.
Yeah, we will definitely try. We'd definitely like our branches to interact more. I mean, your branch in Ireland is very Apple themed, and we are as well in our branch. So we have a connection.
We do have a connection.
Heart connection.
We are coming up on the hour. Do you have any words of wisdom? And then we'll call it a day.
Or we can talk for hours.
Yeah, we can talk for hours. I mean, I'm okay with that too.
No, we're fine. I would just say I have a rule of thumb that I try not put more than 5 ingredients into a pot. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's very simple, tasty food. Let the food do the talking, and start with one dish in your slow cooker. Start with one dish and then move on to the next dish. I started originally just making breakfasts, and then I moved on to lunch, and then I moved on to feasts. But if you just make one dish for a potluck and refine that, and then move on to the next dish, After 4 or 5 potlucks, you have a lunch, or you have one section of a feast, or 2 sections of a feast. So it's as simple as that, and not to be afraid of the food.
That is very, very good advice. And in fact, many modern chefs today agree with that and promote that idea. Fewer ingredients, higher quality.
Yes. I'm lucky where I live.
Yes. All right. We will end broadcast.
Oh, you didn't give us a warning.
Is it ending?
No, mine still says end broadcast.
There we go.